Tim, would you like to share some words of wisdom with us?
Sure, thanks, CC. This week's going to be a little different because it's a story. We can talk about platitudes forever, and you go, well, you can get those out of a book or, underline them somewhere and then put them up on your wall and read them now and then. Uh, Last April, I had a call from a person who had been a former dean when I was teaching. He was a good guy and he loved the band and he used to come and play trumpet. He really wasn't very good. Michael, you could have helped him a whole lot. So could you, Freddie. But anyway, he was a big deal, and the band loved him, made a big fuss over him. And in the times going forward, we've kept in touch with each other. So he called last April, and he's a provost now. He's working his way up to be a president of the university. And he said, we got a shot at a job here, an assistant to the assistant provost. And he said, the assistant provost, nobody gets along with her. We hire somebody, they last 2 weeks, and she's impossible to work with, even though she's incredibly smart, blah, 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 blah. And he said, I saw one of the candidates, you'd written a letter, but he said, she doesn't have the qualifications. He said, we've got doctoral people after this job, but he said, your letter was so convincing. He said, is it worth interviewing her? I said, yeah, what do you got to lose? So after the interview, he called me and he said, I never had an interview like that before. She interviewed me and wanted to know what would be the best thing and so forth. And he said, I'm about to take a shot on this girl. And I said, yeah, you won't lose, right? So I got a call week before last. And he said, this girl's unbelievable. He said, first of all, she befriended Margaret. Was the hateful witch who's the assistant um, provost. And he said, when that happened, everybody joined in. And he said, watching her work was unbelievable. And he said, she did a great job, but he said, the way she put the mortar between the bricks was unbelievable. Well, fast forward, Margaret had some health problems and she's had to retire early. They're going to give the job to this young lady. She's 27 years old. She's going to be an assistant provost. And he said, you know what? He said, I'm moving up to another position in 3 years. And he said, I'm pretty sure she's going to get my job. She'll be like 31 years old, provost at a very elite university. And that's her pathway to be a president of a college. And I said, what's the key? And he said, relationships, relationships, and more relationships. Everybody loves her. Now, again, I knew the girl, she didn't get straight A's, not that that's not important. She wasn't at the head of her class and everything. She didn't graduate kumbaya or whatever that thing is. But what she did was she took care of everybody around her. Maybe there's a lesson to learn in that. Those are my words of wisdom.
Isn't it interesting? It always comes back to relationships, right? That's why so many of us are here. That's why we're lucky to, have some of the Martins with us because of the great relationships that they've formed throughout, well, gosh, Freddie, 50 plus years in the classroom? Something like that.
Yeah, just don't tell anyone.
Just don't tell anyone. Okay. That we're celebrating 50 years in the classroom. What? Okay. But just all those relationships, it all goes back to that. Thank you so much, Tim, for that reminder, sharing that story with us. Scott, do you have a tip of the week
Good evening,
to share with
everybody.
us?
Absolutely. This actually stems from a conversation that Paul Kyle and I had this week, and I had the wonderful opportunity to be with his cluster. And the tip of the week is this, has to do with listening. So for the last 6 months, as I've been doing PD sessions, one of the activities that we do is that we name 2 people on every instrument who are great players that our students should be listening to. And I actually have a picture. The first picture is actually of Joshua Bell, and I asked them, does anybody know who this is? And then we go through, band, and if we're working with orchestra, we do, violin, viola, cello, bass. And they have to come up with 2 or 3 players to create a listening library for their students. And so that's just a great activity for all of us to do, and it's what we should be doing as teachers as well. I want to extend this just a little bit further, though, and it's kind of a homework assignment for you guys, and it's simply this. Go back and listen to So Paul and I were talking about the idea of like, are band folks listening to orchestral works, or orchestra people listening to choir works, and kind of like, are we listening to different types of cultures and whatnot? So here's your little homework. Do a 4-year review of all the Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Dvorak, Mahler, and Bruckner symphonies. And matter of fact, we'll just go ahead and get this out. My family already knows that, like, if the doctor comes at the end of my life and says he only has 1 week to live, just put Mahler 1 through 9 somewhere, and just put headphones on over my ears and just play Mahler 1 through 9. I'll be good to go. But not just that. Listen to music by Eric Whitacre or Lane Hagenberg. Listen to Water Night by Eric Whitacre, or listen to Deep Peace by Elaine Hagenberg, or Dan Forst's Good Night, Dear Heart, or listen to chamber works like the Dvorak Serenade, or the Mozart Grand Partita, or the Strauss Serenade. Just saturate yourself with great music and great players. And we should. And when you're doing trumpet, you already have 2, and that's the Martins. So you can put that on your list, and we need to have that. We just need to saturate ourselves with great music. So that's my tip of the week, Cece.
Thank you so much. Now you'll have to, everyone, look for on our private Facebook group. I'll go ahead and post something, and I want you to share, what are you listening to this week? And let's make sure that we hold each other accountable for that homework. Just so important. I always say to my students, especially when the 9th graders first get to high school, who's your favorite basketball player? And they list their basketball players, their football star or soccer star, whatever, right? And that's the person that you're trying to shoot like, to dribble like, to whatever. How do you pick up an instrument and not have who is the trumpet player that I want to sound like? Who is the violinist that I want to sound like? Who is my favorite operatic tenor? Who is my go-to jazz ballad singer, right? If you don't have that, then what are we trying to recreate if there's not that model? So I would love to know what you're listening to, and I would love to know what everyone's doing in their classrooms to encourage their students to listen to, because I don't know about you, but when I wanted to listen to marimba as a high school student, I had to order a CD from Japan to listen to Keiko Abe. And months later, wait for it to show up, or go to PASIC and buy CDs to hear percussionists, because there was no such thing as the interweb. To just that in their hand, right? The kids can go, okay, what does Michael Martin sound like? Click. Right here it is. Here's the Boston Symphony. They have it in their hand. So I would love for everyone to share that this week. Thank you so much, Scott. It is now that magical time. I promised that I would try to assemble as many Martins as possible, but it's difficult because they're pretty busy crew. They're a pretty busy crew. And if we talk about Michael, they for those of you that were with us when Michael and Freddie first joined us, they said, well, they're sitting in the basement of Symphony Hall right now. Boston Symphony is playing Mahler this weekend, and Michael is in the trumpet section there. And Michael's this fantastic trumpet player who is a part of a family that there is just the musical family tree just goes in every direction. And, a few of us may know his dad, Freddie, also. I think he's a Hall of Famer or something like that, but we're joking around about 50 years in the classroom, and the years before that being a part of music, always being a part of his life. And we're so excited to have you with us tonight and give you some time to just share some thoughts with us, and then hopefully open up the floor and see what questions. I'm sure we have dozens of questions that we want to ask the two of you, but please, everyone, join me in welcoming Michael and Freddie Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Chris wanted to be here. He's between
playing in the New York Philharmonic and teaching at Juilliard, he had a busy schedule of being a dad of 3 kids today. So I think he's in the throes of bedtime right now. So it was kind of the one speck of his day that he could not rearrange, unfortunately. So otherwise he would have been here. So.
I lost you on the screen there. Where did the Martins go? There they are. Okay.
Okay.
So when we're talking about this musical family tree, was it something that, Michael, you felt like it was inevitable, that there was no choice for you but to follow in your father and uncles and all of them? Maybe could you tell us a little bit about growing up in the Martin family?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so my brother's 10 years older. So the first thing I always say to either colleagues in other orchestras or students that I've taught at the university conservatory level, that don't come from the family that I've come from, is that and like my friends at Northwestern, when I went there, that they most of the people that I work with and have known throughout my life professionally in the orchestra world were the only musicians in their families. And what I always say to them is I don't know how you did it, because between the education I received from my dad and from my mom, who's been an alto in the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra chorus for 20 plus years now. She has more Grammys than anyone in the orchestra, in the family. So but I always say to them, like, how much I admire what they've been able to accomplish, or if it's a student, like how far that they've been able to come even to this point, and what their aspirations are just on their own, being the sole sort of the only child musician. And with Chris being 10 years older, I found my love for the trumpet, ironically, very much separate from Chris, even though I grew up, hearing him practice, and he's always sounded good, and he's always practiced a lot. So it's not that I wasn't surrounded by a great, to go back to the model analogy that you guys were using earlier. I saw Jurassic Park when I was like 7.5. And when the helicopter's flying into the island, like I heard Malcolm McNabb play that trumpet solo, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. That sound is what I want to make for the rest of my life. And so in terms of like I guess the inception of why I wanted to play the trumpet, it was separate from my upbringing and like the home life that I grew up in. But at the same time, like in order to get to where I am today, this is the start of my 15th year in the Boston Symphony, which is weird, bizarre to say. I feel like I can still remember like my play tests with Don Taylor at Simpson Middle School in 1996, like it was yesterday. So it's weird to say that, but despite being surrounded by music education and trumpet playing at the highest level in my house, like mom and dad were very, I would go so far as to say adamant about exposing me to every other discipline or hobby or extracurricular activity that I expressed any interest in. And not just like, okay, yeah, go, you want to you want to play baseball? Okay, like let's go try and play baseball. You know, it was an exposure to like the best coaches that they knew, the best, the best like baseball, basketball, soccer, tennis camps, anything. I was very active in sports as a kid, and so it was. I would say it was quite. I would say it was quite the opposite. And it's a great question that you ask. It was very much the opposite of like, no, like you're going to play a brass instrument and you're going to be great at it. You're going to be one of the best in the world at it. There was very much I think almost a safeguard against, we don't want you to feel like you have to do this, because they watched my brother very successfully go through his career when he went to Eastman, and then he took a few auditions that he didn't win, like a very small number in college, and then
Seems small to you anyway.
yeah. But they saw firsthand like how difficult the process is, and how much of yourself you have to give through Chris, how much of himself he had to sacrifice, and he had to like put parts of his life on layaway so that the trumpet came first. My brother had an amazing reputation when he was in school at Eastman, as like he would always hang out, he would always, he would show up to the party, but like not until he'd finished his 4 hours that day. Like that was always Chris's reputation, and it still is. Like for any of you that have met my brother, he's impossible not to like. He's he always makes you feel like you've known each other for years, and that's how he's made everyone feel. But at no point in his ability to do that has he ever sacrificed the most mundane, necessary details that it takes to be, in my opinion, our opinion, the best trumpet player in the world. And mom and dad were very seeing that, and knowing that, being sort of the classic, little brother to a successful younger brother to a successful older brother, I was like, no, I want to do that, and I can do it, and I'll be better than him. And I just want to do it. And they were like, well, can you really? Like, you're super ADD. Like, I don't know, you like all this other stuff. Maybe it's really hard to do that. Are you sure you want to do it? So I feel like there was almost to my benefit always. That's always where my parents have made every decision when it comes to Chris and our sister Crystal. Like, it's always been what's in your best interest, whether you know it or not right now. The exposure to anything else that I was interested in the end ended up distilling like my love and focus for playing the trumpet. So it was very much even my trumpet teacher, who was the same teacher my brother studied with, Larry Black, who was a longtime section player in the Atlanta Symphony, now lives in Brevard, in the Carolinas, and is still a phenomenal teacher. Even he was like, you don't have to do this just because your brother did. And I had felt like I had to like sort of yell at everyone. Like, I know. No, I like really want to do this. And I know it's hard, but I want to do it. So I sort of had like I had like an angel and a devil on my shoulder at all times, of like the angel of, growing up with dad and mom and this just world-class music education from the time I could walk. And then also being able to tap my brother anytime I wanted. And then at the same time, it was once I really committed and I went to Northwestern and started auditioning, there was always a comparison of, like, you're playing the same instrument as Chris Martin. Like, are you ever going to be as good as him? Are you going to be better than him? Like, how are you going to stack up? How are you going to measure up? And I think that was always a motivator in a really positive way for me, and then coupled with like the very nurturing atmosphere that mom and dad always fostered at home, you know, it led to me being able to sit here and say I've been in the orchestra for 15 years now. So yeah, that's the long-winded answer. So the short answer is like, no, there was never ever a mandate in the Martin house to do anything other than, you know, what you felt called to do or what it was that brought you the most joy. So it just it just so happened through like very parallel but also unrelated avenues that I saw my brother becoming the best trumpet player in the galaxy, and I was like, yeah, sure. That's also the thing that I really want to do and be compared to at all times for the rest of my life. But it's yeah, but it's worked out great, and I'm very, you know, I'm very grateful to Dad and to Mom for the compass they instilled in all of us, and the ability to choose for ourselves what it is we wanted to do, as well as
Yeah, Michael, I'm curious. Sorry, Cece, if I can pose a question. I'm thinking back and I remember the day you got the call. And I know some of your journey before that, and what I think is really cool. It might be helpful for some of our folks that are going to watch the replay or people in this room. We've got some people that are finishing their undergraduate, getting ready to step into the classroom. We've got folks that are in their first 5 years teaching. We've got some that are in the mid-year component. And I think many of us are burdened in that we see more people in the 5 to 15 year window stepping away from the profession. And here you serve as a great role model of 15 years of success. And I think one of the things that's hard for a lot of us in the journey is we see folks like you and Freddie and our models and our role models, and we think that suddenly our life is going to be just like that, like tomorrow, and because it isn't, we suck or we whatever, you know. And so what advice would you have? Because I know that you had more than a couple of auditions in your journey, and you are now living the reality of your tenacity. What advice would you give for some of the folks that are on the call or watching in the replay that they're finding it tough right now? They're finding that moment where maybe it's the third, the fourth call that isn't what you wanted it to be, or life is harder right now and doesn't seem like it's worth it. What advice would you give from your perspective of your journey?
I mean, I definitely want Dad to chime in on this too, but I'm happy to start. Like one of the most important, I think, trumpet lessons I ever took was with John Hagstrom, who played second trumpet to my brother in the Chicago Symphony while my brother was there for about 10 years. And I had 2 lessons with him. I was going through an embouchure change when I was a senior in college, by the way. So for band directors out there who are afraid of teaching embouchure changes or how to teach it at any point, I was 20, I was 21, 20, and I had already had a lot of success as a trumpet player at that point. So like, if you're ever apprehensive about like the very justifiably scary nature of like how to teach an embouchure change to anyone, and you want to reach out to me, please do, because that was the context of taking lessons, those 2 lessons with John. And it was 2 trumpet lessons, but I think together they spanned about 5 hours. But in the first of those 2 lessons, John gave me an analogy that sort of it recalibrated my perception of what it was that I really wanted, and what I was sort of willing to endure to get there. And it was a very simple analogy. It was basically, he was talking specifically about like, do you want to play trumpet in an orchestra and go through this really ridiculous, arduous, extremely unfair audition process that has nothing to do with actually playing in the orchestra. It's just about who sounds the best by themselves for 3 rounds in a row in a day. And it was basically like, you know, are you willing to, you know, live above a pizza parlor, you know, paying $400 a month in rent, and nobody knows who you are for your entire life for 40 years, and you're working day in and day out, and then you magically, you know, this deal with the devil you've made is that after 40 years you're going to win like the biggest job in the world, and then everyone knows who you are forever, if that's, you know, that's what you want. Like, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to live above the pizza parlor in obscurity in order to achieve this, you know, ridiculous goal of getting paid to play the trumpet? And of course it's like that is, and he conceded, he was like, in no way is this actually the reality of it, but to put yourself in the mindset to prepare at the level you have to in order to be better than everyone else who's also really good and has studied with great teachers and practiced just as hard as you do, you know, are you willing to fail repeatedly over and over and over? And that was, it was the most important sort of 30-minute lecture in one of 1,000 lessons that I took between the ages of 15 and 23 in order to actually get to a place where I won an audition for an orchestra, because what I realized he was trying to convey was like, it wasn't about the process was not about, okay, I finally made it, now I'm in the orchestra. And it's something that I come back to at least once or twice a year, is that moment in that lesson in 2006. And it's that I fell in love with the process of practicing and being the best that I possibly could, every single day, recording myself religiously in those days on a mini disc player. And then, you know, and then eventually on an iPhone with an external microphone and all that, but being dogmatic about holding myself to a higher standard than anyone else possibly could, and falling in love with that process, because that's the only way you would ever endure, you know, this other side of the parable, you know. And so for my career, for playing trumpet, that was the sort of like that was the crucible that I had to put myself in mentally in order to do it. And being willing to accept that, and then sort of regroup and say, yeah, I'm going to go to work tomorrow. And none of this hard work may show up for another 4 decades. Am I willing to agree to that? And, you know, quote unquote, shake hands with the devil on that and know that it'll pay off one day. Yeah. Now the flip side of that, for the band directors in the room, is as arduous and as terrible as it sounds to just like live in obscurity above a pizza parlor in Evanston, Illinois for 40 years. Like, none of that holds a candle to dealing with administrators. So, and that's why I want Dad to chime in, is because I do have a very, good fortune to travel around and work with bands that I arrange for and write for. And man, God, and having grown up in a household with a band director for my entire life, watching administrators go from advocates to hurdles in the way that it has, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, is something I applaud all of you for enduring. But I do think there is enough crossover and parallel to both of them, that it was worth sharing that story, at least from my perspective. And it's not to say that anyone who leaves the profession isn't doing it for very valid reasons, because
Right.
I think the biggest difference in what most of you have to deal with in the day-to-day has way less to do with the effort you're putting into your craft and your profession as it does with the impediments that you're suddenly presented with having to overcome without your consent. So to that end, I can't think of anyone better to speak on the evolution of that, and also the staying power required to get through that and stay in the classroom and still continue to reach untold number of kids through music than my dad. So
Yeah, I think the key takeaway on a lot of that, Michael, is your tenacity to continue to grow and to continue to meet the challenge. And I hope for some of our young folks and our folks struggling is to know that, I mean, Michael's example of what he just gave was that you have permission to know that our greatest leaders are also continuing to have to learn and working on a daily basis to get better at their craft. And that's a huge key to their success. And I know of no one better than your dad, who certainly has helped me and many of us in the room hone our craft well past our prime, so to speak. So I'd love to hear his advice on that too.
Well, thank you, David. I always learn more from you than you ever did from me, but that's very kind of you to say those things. Yeah, I'm probably a fairly good example of stick to it. My first teaching year was at South Cobb High School in the fall of 1969. That was in the other century, by the way, in case you're not counting, because to understand, my motivation was I could either teach at South Cobb or I could go to Vietnam and die. And those were the two choices that there were. You could get a 2A teacher deferment. Some years you couldn't. Some years you just hoped your number was high enough that you didn't have to go. But the reality was it was the Vietnam era. And so I found a love in seeing the lights come on in kids' eyes to a point that it was addictive. Scott and I both had feelings of playing French horn in a symphony orchestra, and I know for sure Scott had a lot better shot at that than I ever did. But the reality came back to, by the time the Vietnam thing was settled and I could just teach every day, I didn't want to do something else. I had no desire to do something else, because it was never about how good is the band. It was always about how many lights came on today, how many kids got excited about what we did, how many of my students are actually enthusiastic, which is not something I ever really expected. You know, I was just a French horn player. I spent my life in a practice room with a piano, not even a pianist, just me every day. And then I'm foolish enough to think that I can socialize myself to the point that I can teach all these kids. Well, the good news at South Cobb is my first rehearsal, I only had 17, so I didn't have to worry about it being a really big crowd. We had 16 musicians and Stanley. Stanley was a drummer. I don't mean percussionist. Stanley was a drummer. Great kid, wonderful person. And so our first week together, I said, Stanley, how many friends do you have? He said, several. I said, bring them all. They now play drums. So the next week we had a drum line of people that didn't know what they were doing. But is that strikingly different than the drum lines we teach today? Well, I don't know. We just have to look at that and see, right? So the fun of teaching to me, and it will be again tomorrow when I go to the schools and I work with the marching bands, and I go back this winter and I work with the symphonic programs, is seeing that individual kid who wants to get better, but they don't have any idea how. The band director has a certain number of hours. When those hours are up, so are the kids. Sometimes there's enough money for them to bring in a set of private teachers that's very helpful. Usually not. So what it comes back to is, how can I educate me to a point that I can do them some good? How do I teach that trumpet player to play with a better sound? Because we all know that the trumpet itself was never designed to play music. It was designed to send people off to die. So the fundamental is, this is one of the funniest things that I think about every day. All those years ago, we had cornets, and they sounded so beautiful naturally. And we went, oh no, this is too easy. We're going to put them all on trumpet, and then they'll sound like terrible. And as soon as they sound like terrible, we can figure out ways of making the trumpet sound like a cornet, which we haven't done yet. So forgive that side thought just for a second, but say something.
I still don't sound like a cornet even when I play a cornet. So
So joy is what makes anybody do anything. And the sadness that I see most often, and I love you all, and I know why you do it, is for us to convince our kids that they're not good. And it hurts my soul, because our first response, my grandmother taught English at McEachern High School for 43 years. She was the greatest teacher in history, without a doubt. And she said, if you treat adults like children and children like adults, you'll get along with everybody. So if you're very careful in the way that you approach the individual and you make them feel better about themselves, they can't wait to see you again. And when I hear folks talk about their band programs falling apart, I often wonder, have you just reached a point that you're so unhappily negative that they don't want to be around you anymore? Because I think we have to wordsmith, and we have to wordsmith, and we have to wordsmith. How do we present that doesn't sound very good? How do we say to them, that's not a good sound, without saying, that's not a good sound? I think the very best we have is different than what I'm hearing from you right now. What do you think? I think the problem comes back to joy. If we are joyous, then so are they, and they can't wait to come to our classroom tomorrow. But if we're unhappy, and if we feel pressured because of some stupid rating, or worse than that, this summer garbage that I do all summer, where winning is everything. Come on. Funky Winkerbean taught us forever ago, didn't he? That's the purpose of good music, is to win. And he was making fun of all of us because he was a trombone player and his high school band director was a compete freak. So he made fun of it in every way he could, trying to teach us a lesson. What a beautiful lesson, right? So be happy. I don't know what to say other than, I mean, if you need to listen to a comedian before you go out to class, listen to a comedian before you go out to class. Somebody that really makes you laugh for a really clean, worthwhile, wholesome reason. Makes sense? Not the other kind, because then you may not be working there tomorrow. So let's make sure that whatever we heard the last thing we walked out to talk to those kids, our own self-talk, is what? I love these kids. I cannot wait to get out there and teach. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, have you done this for 54 years? I said, I don't remember. I really don't. I don't remember why I've done it for 54 years. The only thing I can remember is yesterday and what I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And if your program is not where you want it to be, take Boyd McCowan's advice. He was my first music supervisor. And Boyd taught us easily for years, the best way to build a high school band is to be able to stand the embarrassment that you're standing in front of for 3 years. Because over 3 years, it won't be an embarrassment anymore because you'll be doing your job. So if year 1 or year 2 or year 3, you weren't the best in the business, don't worry about that. I know some of those guys. What you want to do is be you. Okay? I think it's great. I think you should get a Dad's Book of Bad Jokes. Have you got it? Get Dad's Book of Bad Jokes. Every day at the end of class, tell them a bad joke. So they all groan and look at you like you're an idiot, because that will bring them back tomorrow. If you can find jokes with no punchline that they have to provide, tell them to bring it back tomorrow. But the thing that comes back to is, yes, I want you to be quiet and listen and focus and play better, because that's the joy of music. But the joy of living is a smile on your face and a twinkle in your eye. You know, Dr. Walters used to tell us, you know, you should smile every day and let people wonder what you've been up to. You know? So I try to do that as consistently as I can because I just love kids. I know they don't have a frontal lobe, and I know most of the time that makes them seem kind of dumb. But, you know, so are we. I don't know when my frontal lobe's coming in. I haven't quite, I haven't had that examination from a doctor yet, but at our age, Tim, we have plenty of those, don't we? So the joy of all of it is just fun. If music is not enjoyable, then why do we need music? And so I want, you know, the teachers used to ask me, what is it y'all do in that class? Because when your kids come to my class, they're so happy. And I said, we just do happy stuff. We just do happy stuff every day. You know, working with, oh goodness, Brody, my sweetheart, other daughter, Aaron Cole.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Aaron Cole.
But Aaron is the one that I worked with doing her brass for a couple years when she took this band from Tapp Middle School to the Midwest and outplayed everyone with kids who had no chance. You could ask anybody, those kids, they don't have a chance. Yeah, they did, because she knew exactly what made them happy. She knew exactly what they needed. And she made certain that that's what they got every day when they walked in her class. And to watch her class begin, any of you ever see her teach? I was so lucky. I got to see her teach a few hundred times. I know you did. I got to see her teach a few hundred times, and it was astounding. Every day was the same. The kids walked in, there was not a sound. She wasn't even on the podium. She was in the office. Some music was playing that they were playing for their next performance, just because she wanted them to sit down and find their focal point as they put their instruments together, rather than acting like they don't have a frontal lobe. So she taught them how to act without it. And then later on in their lives, I bet you, they couldn't have appreciated anything more than they did Miss Cole, ever. So I went on too long, but I'm truly enthusiastic. One of the reasons I love going out and teaching now is working with the directors. So everybody I worked with is a kid. Do you realize that when you get to be my age, everybody's a kid? So it's really kind of cool, you know? And how do you teach? You speak to adults like what? Children, and you speak to children like adults, and you get along with everybody. And she was so right about everything on earth. Okay.
No, that's priceless, Freddie. That's priceless. I'm one of your kids. If you can bring Freddie into a rehearsal, do it. I learned so much from him. There's so many people that are nodding. Yes, we all do. And make no mistake about it. I think, and Freddie, I want to ask you if you'll talk about this just a little bit, but I there are camps of folks who think that what we stand for here at Slam in creating this positive culture where there is joy present in every rehearsal. There's some folks who just think it's phooey. It's all just warm and fuzzy, and you can't have a good band or a good orchestra, a good choir if you're wasting time making kids laugh. And I think, I think back to, I think I found that score sheet from when you and Dan had your bands from South Cobb and Sprayberry, Marching Bands of America in like the early 80s. And your ensembles have always been fantastic. So where does that come from? How do you produce and still create joy? I think that's still a matter of conflict for some folks.
Yeah, I try to explain it this way. Fun to me is the Batman ride at Six Flags. That's fun. You get on the thing, it's really, it's special. But when it's over, it's over. And if you want to do it again, you got to go stand in that line again. So that's fun, but accomplishment is long lasting. And when we teach kids accomplishment, they want to continue to accomplish. They want to get better. The thing about teaching tone quality, like when I work with Crown, or I worked with Cavaliers, or I worked with the kids that age, because that was the reason I love drum corps, because the age of the kids, because they're really close to going out in the world to make a place for themselves or make a mess of themselves. It depends on who they determine that they are and what they want to be. But what I try to convince them of is accomplishment is what is the true happiness. That's where we're most focused, and that's where the reason you came here is because you wanted to accomplish. You wanted to do something extraordinary, something special. Well, the same thing's true when I go to Pope to work with Bo, because he and I share a philosophy that's identical. It's a matter of accomplishment. It's not a matter of we're going to do 3 hours. It's a matter of here's what we're going to accomplish today. We're going to start at this time and we're going to end when that's accomplished. And we try to hold ourselves to that standard so that the kids know that we value them and their time. We also value them and their personality. When a student comes up to talk to you, if you listen and say, and you're looking everywhere but at that student, then you're not talking with that student. They're talking at you and hoping for the best. Well, I see that so often. And so I think, well, if I was that kid and I had a problem, would I want to come back and talk to that person again? Now, the reality is I want them to come back and talk to me anytime they feel they need to. And that goes on all summer, whether it's on the Crown bus or if it's on the Cavalier bus or if it's with Spirit of Atlanta kids or whoever it is. It goes on all the time because I want them to know they're important. And if you don't think the third trumpet player in the marching band is important, then you're not listening to your whole score. Because it is. And just because they're in the 9th grade and they can hardly put a sentence together because you make them so nervous, that doesn't mean that they don't have something worthwhile to say. But what if we make them feel like it was worthwhile, even if we're standing there thinking, what could get me out of here? Right? I'm sorry. The reality is the reality. But if that's what we do, and that's what we say, do we have the knowledge to pull it off? Do I really know how to make a 20-year-old college music major trumpet make a better sound than his college professor? Well, if I do, then I have total credibility with that kid, and I hear from them for years and years. In fact, I end up teaching with several of them. So I need to know how to do that. I need to know how to teach tone quality and the articulation, those method things that I've learned more from my kiddos than they ever learned from me. But the reality is, if I can do those things and build that credibility, then they're going to want to stay. If a clarinet player asks me, what's the alternate fingering for high Z sharp? And I don't know, the best thing for me to say is, I don't know. I don't know everything. Have you looked at all of these instruments? Do you really think I could play all of this? Yeah, that's a joke in a way, but the reality is, right? So anyway, I think the thing that keeps us teaching is excitement and joy and seeing the lights come on in their eyes. I just saw a kid, I was at Scott's old school a couple of days recently, and I was talking to a kid about playing mellophone, and the kid was a sweetheart, and he was a freshman, and his mellophone, it really did sound like an F trumpet with a bad bell. You know, it was really not good. But all he had done was he didn't get the mouthpiece put back where it needed to go. And because of the mouthpiece position, he had playing with air and bad attacks and you name it. So we took 2 minutes and fixed it, and he thought I was the greatest thing ever. And the reality was that was so simple. But the other part of it was never about him not being good. It was always about him being better. This is something, I just want you to try this and see if it makes you better. Would you try this and see if it makes you better? Wow, I just listened to you try that. You actually did a wonderful job, because the reality is, and I tell the kids in the corps and the bands that I work with, nobody's ever going to teach you anything. All we're going to do is give you information. You're going to teach yourself. So if you absorb that information and you teach yourself, you get better much faster than if you have to depend on me to provide the information every day. Okay. Your nodded heads certainly make me feel good about what I'm saying. Thank you. I seldom in my life have sat and spoken to a computer screen. So this is.
Well, we're glad that you said yes.
I'm trying to convince this computer that it's doing a good job.
Well, as we near the top of the hour, I want to ask Tim, do you have anything else for Freddie or Michael before we wrap up tonight?
Sam, I think you're muted.
He's our tech guru.
Oh yeah, I'm the tech guru. I just thanks for being here, Michael. It's good to see you again, my friend. And Freddie, it's always good to see you. You know, I love you both. I tell your brother the same. For all of us, I just feel like we've been at some kind of brainwashing, if that makes sense. We got our brains scrubbed real well tonight, and it just feels good, right? Kind of get all that icky stuff out of there and go back to it. And I'll tell you what, watching Freddie work for so many years, if he can do it at his age with the amount of excitement that he brings to the session, then the rest of us, shirt tail for sure. Get on that shirt tail, because the more you give, the more you're going to get back. To give more, to give back more, to give more. I'm going to add something to your letter this week called "Everything You Do Makes a Difference." It was written by a band director, and it talks about, and Freddie, it was what you were talking about, the connection is going on all the time. What begs the answer to the question is, what kind of connection is it? Because as you said, Freddie, if the kid's talking to you and you're looking at your watch, you can't yell much louder. I really don't care what you're talking about. And it's a quick click off, and they'll go to the soccer coach, who may be the one that'll look them in the eye and talk to them. So we're back to, it's kind of interesting, an alpha omega of relationships. And we're back to the same thing. And the best part, certainly about the Martins, is they walk the talk. They walk it, and they walk it with a sense of class that's unknown in common hours. And when Freddie first told me, I got a couple boys, I think they're going to be fine trumpet players and maybe even be in a symphony someday. I'm thinking, well, maybe one, but two? So you understated it, Freddie, as you always do. But this has just been a great night for all of us. CC, great job. Again, Michael and Freddie, thank you. Tell Chris we said hi. And we want you all to have a great week. Blessings.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone, have a great week. We hope to see you next Sunday. We'll be here same time with composer, musician, dad, great human, Brian Balmages. So thank you so much for being here, Michael, Freddie. I love you. Thank you both.
Bravo, Martins.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you.